Hey guys, tonight we ride straight into the sunburnt, dust choked gunslinging world of the Wild West. You're not watching from afar, no, you're in it. The year? Let's call it 1873. The town? Some nameless speck on the map, nestled between cactus and consequence. Your boots are new but stiff. Your hat is too big. And the second you step off that creaky stagecoach, a tumbleweed rolls by, almost mocking you. It's hot. Not beach hot. Not even sauna hot. This is, why is the air trying to cook my organs? Hot. Your mouth's dry. You forgot to pack water. Rookie move. Dust cakes your teeth, and the town's one water barrel, yeah, the one with a do not spit sign, looks suspiciously murky. There's a hitching post, a saloon with swingy doors, and a general store selling beans, bullets, and buzzards circling overhead. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first mistake you make isn't the shirt, wrong fabric, by the way, too thick, or the boots, which are giving your heels a slow death. No, your real mistake was thinking this would be fun, that you'd experience history, that maybe you'd saddle up, flash a charming grin, and wrangle some action like a spaghetti western hero. Instead, your first hour is just sweat and secondhand stares. A cowboy tips his hat, but it's not friendly. It's more like, who's this fancy fool? And the townsfolk? They're a little too quiet, a little too watchful. You're the outsider. You smell like lavender soap. You haven't learned to squint right. You try walking across the main street and immediately regret not wearing goggles. The wind blows gritty sand straight into your eyeballs, and your lips feel like someone's dragging them across dry bark. The sun doesn't just beat down, it presses. There's no sunscreen. Historians still argue whether lard or flour paste was the go-to sunblock. Either way, you've got nothing but regret and a red neck, literally. Mainstream history books often glamorize this frontier life, but here's a mainstream fact. About 1 in every 3 Western townspeople suffered chronic dehydration. You're already halfway there. That canteen you thought would be available? Sold out. And even if it wasn't, the water likely has floaty things in it. Protein, maybe. You duck into the general store for shade. Inside, it smells like leather, candle wax, and very old beans. You eye a tin cup and consider stealing a sip from the cracked jug near the counter. But the storekeeper eyes you back, and not in a helpful way. This is the kind of place where theft is punished by, well, it depends on who's in the mood to enforce what. A creaky sign overhead reads, Calico and Sundries. They sell everything except mercy. You spot a jar labeled Snake Bite Cure. The ingredients list is mostly whiskey and prayer. The clerk finally grumbles, you buying or loitering? You fumble, mumble something about just arrived, and back out with your pride slightly more bruised than your sunburn. Outside, your shirt's soaked through. A distant bell clangs. Lunch hour? No, someone's horse got loose again. It happens. You dodge the galloping beast, your foot slipping in what you sincerely hope is just old mud. Spoiler, it's not. By the way, that whole high noon thing, it's not a movie trope. It's when duels, deals, and double crosses happened because it's when everyone was awake and miserable together. A weirdly social time for public aggression. And you're about to find out just how testy people get when they're hot, hungry, and armed. You consider heading to the saloon. You've seen westerns. Maybe there's piano music and a bowl of peanuts. Spoiler number 2, no piano, no peanuts. But you go anyway, swing through the doors and boom, dust, smoke, and 50 eyeballs instantly lock on you. One guy coughs so hard his spittoon tips over. Another's asleep on his stool. A few glance at your shoes. They're still clean. Another mistake. Someone mutters, greenhorn. You nod, say howdy like you practiced, and immediately regret it. Too chipper. You walk up to the bar, slap a coin down, and ask for water. The bartender raises an eyebrow so high it almost becomes a hat. We got whiskey. That's it. That's the drink menu. You hesitate. It's early? He shrugs. Not for this place. You take the glass. It tastes like regret and something slightly flammable. But you're thirsty and desperate and a little dazed because the floor's already tilting. That's when a man with one eye, no shirt, and a hat larger than his horse sits down next to you and starts muttering about a claim he lost in Nevada. You smile politely. Big mistake. His hand falls to his belt, where something metal glints. Let's freeze here. Historical note: duels and fights were rarely about justice. They were usually about ego. And just looking wrong at someone could mean a smashed jaw or worse. A quirky tidbit: the phrase, "he needed killin'," was once considered an actual defense in some local courts. Not legally sound, but, vibes. Anyway, your new acquaintance leans in. "You from back east?" You nod. "Boston." He grins. "Never trusted seafood folk." Cool. Just when you think you're about to get a knuckle sandwich, the doors creak open again, and in walks a group of actual cowboys. Dusty, confident, guns visible. They scan the room like they own it. They probably do. Your one-eyed friend suddenly decides you're no longer interesting. Crisis averted, for now. You step outside, heart racing. The sun hasn't moved, the shadows are shorter, and you're only 1 hour into your Wild West adventure. Already dehydrated, slightly drunk, lightly threatened, and completely unprepared. You glance back at the saloon. You won't be going back there. But unfortunately, things out here are only going to get harder. Awaiting, continue. You shuffle toward the livery stable, thinking maybe, just maybe, a horse could make this whole thing easier. After all, that's what cowboys do, right? Ride off into the sunset, the breeze cooling their face, the hooves clomping rhythmically beneath them. You can practically hear the movie soundtrack already. That dream lasts approximately 8 seconds. Because the first thing you notice inside the stable is the smell, an aggressive bouquet of manure, hay, and something that smells suspiciously like expired pickles. The second thing you notice is the horse. Your horse, or so the grizzled stableman says. He pats its side like he's proud of having paired you with the devil's own steed. This animal is massive. Its eyes scream, "I hate you," and its tail flicks like it's warming up to kick. You approach gently. Too gently, apparently. The stableman snorts. It's a horse, not your grandma. Still, you try your best cowboy swagger. You tug the reins, plant a foot in the stirrup, and promptly get halfway up before your other leg doesn't follow. You kind of hang there, flapping like a broken weather vane. The stableman rolls his eyes, gives your back a hearty slap, and somehow you land in the saddle. Victory. For about 3 seconds. Then the horse starts moving, not galloping, just trotting. But even that's enough to rattle your bones into dust. It's like being tossed in a very angry wheelbarrow. You feel every bump, every wobble, every yeehaw of regret from your tailbone straight up your spine. Historical fact. Horses weren't actually the default travel method for most Westerners. Historians agree that many settlers walked or used oxen-pulled wagons because horses were expensive and, surprise, hard to ride. But you didn't get that memo. Your thighs scream. Your spine hums like a broken violin. The stableman yells, "Squeeze with your knees." You do. The horse speeds up. You stop squeezing. The horse abruptly stops, then sneezes in your direction. Yes, horses sneeze, and now you're covered in it. You wobble out of town, trying to look like you know what you're doing. You don't. And that's when you encounter your first real trail. It's not a path. It's a suggestion. Loose rocks, thorny bushes, gopher holes, and for some reason, a skull. Not human, probably. You steer the horse around it and immediately get thwacked by a mesquite branch. Your hat flies off. It rolls into a dry creek bed. You dismount, bad idea, and chase after it. By the time you retrieve the hat, your horse has wandered off to chew something sharp-looking. When you remount, after another dignified struggle, you try to regain composure. But your legs already feel like pudding, and your inner thighs are on fire. The saddle's about as forgiving as a church pew with a grudge. You ride for maybe an hour. Maybe. Time here stretches like old leather. Every minute feels like 3. The landscape is stunning, in a brutal sort of way. Flat plains, cacti like alien arms, red dirt that stains your skin. But the heat never quits. Your water's gone. Your lips are cracking. You spot a vulture circling and wonder briefly if it's for you. Then you see movement. Another rider. Relief? Maybe. But the man approaching you looks like he hasn't blinked since spring. His beard is hiding secrets. His rifle glints in the sun. You nod. He nods. A long silence. "You headed to Dry Gulch?" he asks. You say the first thing that pops into your head. Maybe. He spits. Don't. And rides off. Fringe tidbit, a lot of Wild West towns had names like Dry Gulch, Snakebite, or Dead Man's Fork. Part joke, part warning. And often, accurate. You try to turn your horse around. It does not agree. It trots in a lazy circle, clearly more experienced than you and unimpressed with your leadership. You finally nudge it back toward town. The journey is slower. You're out of energy. You're sun-stunned, dust-covered, and every bump makes you want to cry. By the time you reach the stable again, you don't so much dismount as slide off. Your legs wobble. You thank the horse, audibly. It ignores you. The stableman laughs and mutters something about city folks and their soft knees. Historians still argue whether early saddle designs were meant for comfort or just for control. Either way, you feel neither. You lean against a fence post, unsure if you'll ever walk like a normal person again. As you limp toward the watering trough, considering dunking your whole head in it, you hear something. A distant scream. Or maybe a yeehaw. It's hard to tell the difference out here. You look down at your hands. They're blistered from the rains. Your back aches, your thighs. Well, you're starting to think you'll never sit properly again. And guess what? It's still only mid-afternoon. You're filthy, dehydrated, a walking cramp. The romantic image of galloping across the plains has been replaced by the stark reality of heat stroke and saddle sores. Your cowboy fantasy is unraveling faster than a cheap lasso, and you haven't even had lunch yet. Word count. Awaiting continue. You limp down the dusty street like a drunk marionette, every step a whispered threat from your thighs. Your stomach growls. Not a polite suggestion either, it's an aggressive demand. You haven't eaten since sunrise, and all that whiskey/horse sneeze combo didn't exactly help your digestive confidence. So you head to the only place that smells remotely like food, the saloon. Yes, the same saloon where you almost got punched over eye contact. But hunger wins over caution. You push open those swinging doors, gingerly this time, and step inside. The air is thick with pipe smoke and overcooked meat. The piano still isn't playing, but there's a man loudly humming Camptown races while playing cards. You slink up to the bar and mutter, "Got any food?" The bartender doesn't even look up. "Got beans, got jerky, got stew, maybe. Depends." Depends on what? He finally looks at you. If there's any left. This is not the menu of champions. You opt for the stew, and a bowl appears. It's mostly gray. A thick skin coats the surface like it's daring you to touch it. You poke it with the spoon. It doesn't react. You take a bite and immediately regret every decision that led you to this moment. It tastes like regret and mystery meat. Possibly squirrel, possibly older than the town. Mainstream fact: the average frontier meal consisted of beans, bread, and preserved meat, often for weeks at a time. Nutritional balance? Not really a thing. Scurvy? A very real concern. You choke down 3 spoonfuls before switching to the jerky. It's tough, not chewy, but challenging, like gnawing on a tire with seasoning. You fight through it anyway. Desperation makes all things possible. The bartender, seeing your struggle, offers a tip. Dip it in the stew. Softens it up. It does. But now it just tastes like stew-flavored tire. Still, you press on. You're a frontier survivor. A dusty, sore, half-dehydrated one. But hey, you're still vertical. Kind of. Suddenly, the door bursts open. A large man stomps in, grumbling. His boots clomp like thunder. Everyone looks up. He locks eyes with you. You freeze mid-bite, jerky dangling from your lips like a sad cowboy mustache. "You spill my drink earlier?" he asks. You didn't. You definitely didn't. But logic doesn't seem high on this guy's list of priorities. "No," you say calmly, hoping to diffuse. "Wasn't me." He narrows his eyes. You look like someone who would. Let's pause here. Fringe tidbit. In some Western saloons, it was common to have a spit box near the piano and a designated area where fights could legally be settled, as long as both parties were willing. One famous bar in Abilene, Kansas had a rule: no shooting after 10 p.m. Before that, knock yourself out. Back to your situation. This guy is not interested in spit boxes or formalities. He stomps closer. The bar goes silent. A dog outside howls, because of course it does. You stand, your knees cracking like dry wood. "Look," you say, hands raised. "I'm not from here." He grunts. "Yeah, obvious." Before you can explain further, he shoves you. Not hard, more like a warning push, but still enough to send you stumbling backward into a table of card players. Cards go flying. Chips scatter. One of the players, a wiry man with a mustache that could double as a broom, growls, "You just messed up my straight flush." You're now the center of a very angry Venn diagram. One circle is guy who thinks you spilled his drink. The other is guy who lost a card game, and you are standing at the flaming overlap. You raise your hands again. How about I buy a round for the table? Everyone pauses. A brief silence. Someone coughs. All right, says Broom Mustache. You slap down a coin. It vanishes into the bartender's apron like magic. Drinks appear, glasses clink, and suddenly you're not forgiven, exactly, but tolerated. In Wild West terms, that's as good as it gets. You slump back onto your stool, trying to finish your now cold stew. You succeed, barely. Your stomach will protest later, but for now, it's grateful for the insult of calories. Historians still argue whether bar fights in frontier towns were exaggerated by dime novels or truly part of daily life. Either way, they happen often enough to inspire hundreds of gravestones that read something like, got mouthy, and should have walked away. You did walk away. Kind of. Crawled through it, really. As the saloon crowd returns to their drinking and poker, you realize something else. You're still hungry. Desperate, you approach the counter again. Got anything sweet? The bartender laughs for a full 10 seconds, then hands you a rock-hard lump, molasses candy. Chew slow. It's like biting a brick. Your teeth beg for mercy. You tuck it away for later and accept defeat. You step back outside into the afternoon heat. The sun's lower now, casting long shadows, but it's still a furnace. You try drinking from the horse trough. It's green and chunky. You decide against it. There's a well in the distance. You hobble over, lower the bucket, and hoist it up with more effort than should be legal. The water's cool, at least. You sip. It tastes slightly of rust and onion? Doesn't matter. You gulp it down, hoping your stomach doesn't file an official complaint. Refreshed, somewhat, you glance at the road out of town. Maybe it's time to move on. Get a new start. Somewhere less dusty, somewhere with fruit. But first, maybe you should find shelter for the night. Or at least a place without fists or molasses bricks. You take one step toward the inn, then freeze. Your stomach gurgles. Oh no. Looks like the stew is staging a rebellion. And there's no modern plumbing out here. Welcome to the Wild West. Awaiting continue. You dash, or attempt to, toward the nearest outhouse like a person fleeing a war zone. Every sore muscle protests, but none louder than your gastrointestinal system. It's now a full-blown mutiny. The jerky, the stew, the molasses brick, they've united like disgruntled peasants storming a castle. The outhouse is exactly what you'd expect, a sad wooden box with a crescent moon carved into the door, sitting about 20 yards from the main saloon. Far enough for privacy, too far for comfort. You fling open the door and are immediately greeted by a smell so powerful it feels personal. It's not just bad, it's the kind of bad that has layers. Ancient wrongdoings linger in that air. You brace yourself, hold your breath, and descend into one of the least glamorous aspects of 19th century life. Mainstream historical fact. Sanitation in the Wild West was basically optional. Outhouses were common, but rarely cleaned. Germ theory was barely gaining traction, and most people still thought bad air was what made you sick. Spoiler, it wasn't just the air. By the time you emerge, dazed and reeling from both physical and spiritual trauma, the sun has dropped closer to the horizon. Your insides feel like they've been hit by a tumbleweed going 40 miles per hour. You stagger back into town, bleary-eyed and 30% lighter. You need a place to rest, and maybe rethink your entire approach to life. The inn, or what passes for one, is a 2-story structure made of weathered wood and wishful thinking. A crooked sign reads Dry Dreams Boarding House. Charming. You step inside, ducking beneath a low beam and accidentally elbowing a hanging lantern. It swings dramatically, adding to your constant sense of impending doom. A woman behind the counter looks up from knitting. She doesn't smile. Room? You nod. Please. 15 cents. No breakfast. No bath. You fumble for coins. She gives you a key attached to a giant piece of wood, as if daring you to lose it. Then she points upstairs. Room 4. Don't touch the wallpaper. You climb the stairs slowly, not just from exhaustion, but because each step creaks like it's about to give up and send you through the floor. You reach your room, open the door, and are immediately greeted by simplicity. One bed, one table, one chair, a cracked mirror, a bowl and pitcher of water that looks suspiciously reused. The mattress sags like it's holding on to memories it'd rather forget. You collapse onto it anyway. It's lumpy. It smells faintly of mothballs and something herbal. Maybe someone tried to sage away the nightmares. You lie there in silence, staring at the ceiling, wondering how anyone ever romanticized this life. Sure, there are sunsets, open skies, a feeling of freedom, but there's also diarrhea stew and horses with attitude problems. You try to fall asleep, but the sounds of the town creep in through the walls. Distant harmonica music, a door slamming, footsteps overhead, a baby crying. Then, a scream. Not long, just one sharp ah followed by silence. You sit up, listen. Nothing. You decide it's probably fine. That's the Wild West for you. Fringe tidbit. Many boarding houses back then doubled as brothels or gambling dens. Some even had secret doors to escape police raids. In one infamous Colorado inn, the owner reportedly added extra floors just to hide activities, earning her the nickname Three-Floor Fanny. You're fairly certain Dry Dreams doesn't have secret floors. It barely has a roof. But you're not complaining. The pillow, if you can call it that, feels like it's stuffed with hay and vague disappointment. Still, your body is too tired to argue. Just as you begin to doze off, you hear scratching. Not in your room, under it. You wait. Scratch, scratch, scrape. You bolt upright. Something is beneath the floorboards. A raccoon? A rat? A ghost who died from bad stew? You creep out of bed and place your ear to the wood. Silence. Then, bump. You leap back. Heart racing. Historians still argue whether the fear of vermin in old inns was exaggerated, but there are countless accounts of people waking up with snakes, spiders, or the occasional skunk as roommates. Pest control wasn't really a profession. It was a wish. You leap into bed, tuck your feet in tight, and pull the blanket over your head like a superstitious child. It smells like someone else's sweat, but at this point, that's the least of your worries. Sleep finally comes in fragments. You dream of stew chasing you through the desert, of a horse speaking in riddles, of a town where everyone stares and no one blinks. You wake up in total darkness, unsure how much time has passed. Could be an hour, could be dawn. The room is freezing. Your breath fogs in front of your face. You wrap the blanket tighter and curl into a ball, longing for central heating or even a decent pair of socks. You think about your own bed back home. Soft sheets, climate control, running water. Here, you'd settle for not being attacked by whatever lives under the floorboards. Still, as you drift off again, there's something oddly peaceful about it. The wind outside whistles through the cracks in the wall. Somewhere, an owl hoots. It's quiet, mostly, and despite everything, every cramp, scratch, and mysterious stew ingredient, you're still alive. Barely. Congratulations, you've survived your first full day in the Wild West. But tomorrow, you'll need a job, and that is a whole new nightmare. Awaiting continue. Morning smacks you awake like a cold slap. There's no sunbeam gently warming your face, no birds tweeting like a Disney movie. Nope. You're yanked out of sleep by the sound of someone hammering something metal against something harder. Probably a horseshoe being nailed or a criminal being publicly shamed. Hard to say. You sit up slowly. Your spine makes a sound like a zipper. The blanket is half on the floor. Your mouth tastes like dust and old pennies. And your pillow has somehow flattened itself into an angry, resentful napkin. Time to face another day. Your clothes, still the same ones you wore yesterday, are crumpled, dusty, and now mildly stew-scented. But laundry options in the Wild West are, well, wash it in a stream if you're fancy. So you shake them out, dust off a beetle, it was asleep too, and put them back on with the resignation of someone who knows this is their life now. Downstairs, the innkeeper doesn't look up as you pass. She's already sweeping the same dirt in a circle, and her breakfast special seems to be absence of food. So, job time. You step outside into a world that still looks like it was baked in an oven set to angry sun. It's not even 9 a.m., and already your scalp is sweating under your hat. Dust clings to your eyelashes. You trudge down the main street, scanning for opportunity, or at least something that doesn't require horse knowledge. Because, let's be honest, you're not getting back on that horse. You spot a man putting up a sign near the general store. Hiring, stable hand, immediate start, strong back required. You do not apply. Further down, a small crowd has gathered around a man shouting, "Who wants easy money?" You almost bite, but then see he's holding a bottle and selling Miracle Tonic. He offers a sample to a woman who immediately sneezes 3 times and walks away swearing in German. You keep walking. Mainstream fact. In the American frontier, work was brutal and varied. Blacksmiths, ranchers, saloon workers, carpenters, gravediggers. The pay was often in goods, meals, or IOUs. Minimum wage wasn't even a whisper of an idea. If you weren't skilled, you worked the hardest jobs for the least reward. You finally find a chalkboard near the sheriff's office. Help wanted, courier. 10 miles to Bixby Creek, saddle provided. Pay $1.25, must leave today. Tempting, except horse. Then just below that, help wanted, store assistant, general goods, sorting, lifting, wrapping, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, meals included, no drama. Now, that sounds survivable. You step inside the general store and are immediately greeted by the smell of dried tobacco, leather, and something pickled. Barrels of flour and dried beans line the walls. There are sacks of coffee beans, bolts of fabric, rows of canned goods with labels so faded they might as well say, guess. A tall man with a vest and enormous mutton chops looks up from counting nails. You here for the job? You nod. Know how to wrap a parcel? You shrug. If it doesn't involve livestock, I can probably figure it out. He chuckles. That'll do. You're hired on the spot. Welcome to the glamorous world of lifting 50-pound sacks of grain, refilling molasses jugs, and politely trying not to sneeze from all the dust while tying twine with calloused fingers. By noon, your arms feel like cooked spaghetti. Your shirt is soaked through. You've been elbow deep in coffee beans, knocked over a barrel of vinegar, and accidentally said yes to a customer asking for chewing tobacco, even though you thought he said cherry tomato. You're handed a biscuit as a lunch bonus. It's hard enough to chip a tooth. You gnaw it slowly, watching a fly circle your head like it's judging you. Fringe tidbit. Frontier general stores often doubled as community hubs. People didn't just shop. They gossiped, held informal town meetings, even hosted court sessions. In some towns, the general store was the post office, courthouse, barbershop, and dentist. Yes, dentist. Your boss, Mr. Halbrook, doesn't say much, but when he does, it's usually in the form of one-word orders. Lift, stack, wrap, don't drop that. You try to stay upbeat, sort of. Okay, you fantasize about your bed and indoor plumbing, but you're determined not to die in a pile of coffee beans. Sometime mid-afternoon, the sheriff himself strolls in. Everyone quiets. The man's got presents. Big boots, big hat, big mustache. He buys tobacco, nods to Mr. Halbrook, then turns to you. You new? Just today. He eyes you. Don't make trouble. You nod like a bobblehead. No plans. Good. He leaves. The door swings shut behind him. Historians still argue whether local sheriffs were respected lawmen or corrupt power figures. Some towns had sheriffs who maintained peace with fairness. Others, not so much. One famous case in Tombstone had 3 sheriffs in 6 months, none of whom survived a full term. By sunset, your back is stiff, your fingers are raw, and you've gained a new appreciation for paper wrapping as an Olympic sport. Mr. Halbrook pats you once on the shoulder. That's it. That's your reward. But in Wild West terms, it's basically a standing ovation. He hands you a plate of beans and bread. You try not to flinch at the beans. These at least seem less aggressive than the saloons. You walk back to your room, limping slightly. Along the way, someone nods at you in recognition. It's a small thing, but it makes you feel slightly less like a complete outsider. As you collapse into bed, sore and bean-filled, you think, you didn't get punched today. You didn't eat squirrel stew. You didn't die from mystery molasses. Maybe, just maybe, you're starting to survive out here. Kind of. Awaiting continue. Second full day in the Wild West begins with something dangerously close to optimism. Sure, your arms still feel like they've been dragged behind a wagon, and your mouth tastes like sleep and sawdust, but you're upright. Breathing. Employed. Not bad for someone who thought yeehaw was just a theme park catchphrase 48 hours ago. Today's mission, blend in. Because right now, you stick out. Everyone knows it. The way you walk, the way you mumble thanks to the door when it swings shut. The way you still flinch every time someone says, outhouse. So you decide to study the locals. Learn the ways of the dusty herd. Step 1, fashion. You take mental notes. Every man wears a hat, but not in a flashy, store-bought kind of way. No rhinestones, no novelty feathers. These hats look lived in, bent brims, sweat-stained bands. Some have bullet holes. You're pretty sure one guy's hat was held together with beeswax and rage. Mainstream historical fact. In the real Wild West, hats weren't just fashion. They were survival tools. They shaded your eyes, kept rain off your neck, could be used as a water scoop, and even signaled your role. A tall white hat? Ranch owner. Flat-brimmed bowler? Banker or city man. No hat? You're either new or recently robbed. You tug your own hat lower, trying to channel rugged grit instead of lost cousin visiting from the future. Step 2. Attitude. The people here have what can only be described as dusty indifference. They don't smile unless it's suspicious. Conversations are short. Eye contact is rare. They spit, nod, mutter, and somehow say more in 3 syllables than you manage in an entire paragraph. At one point, a man walks past you and just says, "Humph." You panic. Was that a greeting? An insult? A judgment on your soul? You settle for nodding slowly, which seems acceptable. He doesn't shoot you, so success? Step 3. Language. The dialect is like English put through a meat grinder and seasoned with salt, smoke, and bad decisions. A simple exchange goes like this. You, morning. Old man on bench. Sky's mad dry. Maybe fixin' to snap. Right? Snap. Squints meaningfully. You have no idea what just happened, but you feel like you agreed to something vaguely mystical. You keep walking. Fringe tidbit. Wild West lingo was a mishmash of regional dialects, frontier slang, immigrant phrases, and cowboy code. Words like hornswoggled, galoot, and dry gulch weren't jokes, they were standard fare. Painted lady meant prostitute. Bangtail was a wild horse. Dude was an insult for clueless city slickers. So, you. Back at the general store, you start trying out the language. Carefully. When Mr. Halbrook asks if the sugar sacks have been weighed, you reply, "Yes, sir." All squared away, tight as a tick. He looks at you, blinks once, and nods. Progress. Later, a customer asks where the soap is. You point and say, "Over yonder, past the calico bolts." They find it instantly. Another win. By mid-afternoon, you're starting to feel like part of the landscape. You even catch yourself leaning against the counter with one boot up on a crate, like some seasoned lasso slinger who's definitely broken in at least one pair of spurs. Then someone walks in and throws everything off balance. She's wearing a long forest green skirt that swishes like poetry, high boots, a laced corset, and a look that says, "Yes, I carry a knife, and no, you may not ask why." The room stills a bit. Even Mr. Halbrook grunts in acknowledgement, which is basically him shouting. She approaches the counter and drops a folded piece of paper. "You sell pepper oil?" "Sure do," you say, before realizing you have no idea what that is. She arches an eyebrow. You scramble to locate the bottle, praying it's not something like horse liniment or snake venom. Luckily, it's in the apothecary section. You hand it over. "That'll be 10 cents. She drops a coin, nods once, and leaves. You finally exhale. Historians still argue about the role of women in the frontier. While many were homemakers, others ran businesses, held property, even worked as gunslingers or outlaws. Some dressed like men to work freely. Some made fortunes as traders, saloon owners, or poker players. The Wild West woman is a far more complex figure than the corseted damsel stereotype. You glance back at the door, half expecting her to kick it open again and throw you a cryptic riddle. She doesn't, but still, something in her presence rattled you. Not in a bad way, just in a who's really running this town kind of way. As the sun begins to dip, you finish wrapping a customer's sack of beans and take a moment to lean outside the store. The sky is a watercolor of burnt oranges and purples. A horse snorts nearby. Someone plays a harmonica, a haunting tune that spirals out into the cooling air. You feel it, this strange rhythm to life out here. Harsh, yes, but hypnotic. Dangerous, but oddly sincere. You walk back toward the inn with dirt on your boots and that harmonica tune in your ears. Tonight, you think, you might actually sleep without dreaming of stew monsters. You're wrong, of course, but still, you're starting to survive out here. You might even be learning something. Awaiting continue. You wake up to the sound of a rooster that apparently trained with a military bugle corps. The sun's not even properly up, but your eyes are open, and you're back staging a rebellion. Another day, another chance to not die from boredom, bad beans, or spontaneous duels. But something's different today. When you get to the general store, Mr. Halbrook is waiting with his usual expression, somewhere between disapproval and mild constipation. He hands you a brown envelope. "You're delivering this to the post office in Elk Rock. Wagon's waiting. Go." You blink. "That's outside town?" He nods once. "Half-day ride. Don't get robbed. Excellent." You have approximately zero confidence, even less horsemanship, and no idea what's in the envelope. But apparently, you're now a delivery person in the lawless countryside. You debate faking an ankle injury, but he's already walking away. The wagon is a bouncy little cart attached to a mule with the emotional range of a doorstop. The driver, a teenager with one eyebrow and a permanent scowl, tosses you a canteen and a biscuit the consistency of a fossil. "We ride," he says like he's in a spaghetti western. You nod, climb aboard, and hold on. The trail to Elk Rock is little more than a suggestion scratched into the earth. Sagebrush, dust, more dust, cactus, rock, cow skull, more dust. You're sweating before the sun's fully risen, and by mid-morning, your lips feel like crinkled paper. You pass a rattlesnake sunbathing on a rock, and it barely bothers to hiss. Even the wildlife's too tired to care. Mainstream historical fact: mail and supply routes were critical to frontier survival. The Pony Express, 1860 to 1861, could deliver coast to coast in under 10 days, an astonishing feat at the time. Riders changed horses every 10 to 15 miles and carried light satchels. Before trains, wagons and mules were the post office, pharmacy, and lifeline of rural communities. The landscape is desolate but strangely beautiful. Painted hills ripple in the distance, hawks circle above, and the silence, except for the squeak of the wagon wheels, is almost peaceful. Almost. Around noon, your driver suddenly stops. "What's wrong?" you ask. He points with his chin. "That's smoke." You squint. Sure enough, a thin trail of smoke rises on the horizon, not from a chimney. This is the uncertain, curling kind. Wildfire? Campfire? Or trouble? The driver speaks with all the enthusiasm of a tombstone. "You got the envelope, you go." "Me?" He nods. "Town's just past the ridge. If you don't come back by nightfall, I ain't waiting." You slide off the wagon, brush the dust off your knees, and head toward the smoke. You regret this decision almost immediately. The terrain is brutal. Rocks, sudden dips, bushes designed to stab. You trip once and nearly twist an ankle. A lizard watches with amusement. Then you hear voices. You crouch behind a bush, peeking out. Two men sit around a smoldering fire, passing a bottle. Their clothes are ragged. Their pistols aren't. Bandits? Drifters? Historical reenactors who got extremely lost? One of them stands, stretches, and walks toward a tree, the same tree you're hiding behind. You panic. You reach into your bag and remember, you have nothing useful. No weapon, no plan, just a biscuit. And so, in what can only be described as a survival-adjacent instinct, you throw the biscuit. It clatters on a rock. He turns. "What the?" The other guy looks up. You use the distraction to sprint, or rather to flail rapidly uphill while wheezing. By some miracle, you crest the ridge, and there it is, Elk Rock, a tiny, dusty cluster of buildings, and one very bored-looking man sweeping a porch. You stagger into the post office like you just finished a marathon of regrets. You hand the envelope to the clerk, who doesn't even look up as he stamps it. "That's it," he nods. "You can ride the milk wagon back." "Milk wagon?" "Yeah, it's the slow one." Perfect. Fringe tidbit. Some frontier towns had milk trains or milk wagons that carried dairy, eggs, and perishables between settlements. They often moved slowly to avoid jostling the goods. The job of milk delivery was considered slightly safer than mail riding, but also widely mocked. No one wanted to be the egg guy during a robbery. The milk wagon is, in fact, painfully slow, pulled by an aging mule named Clarence, who stops every time he sees a butterfly. You ride next to a crate of clinking bottles and a woman named Alma, who talks the entire trip about her dead husband's hat collection. Still, you survive. You return to town just after sunset, covered in sweat, dust, and 14% more humble than before. Mr. Halbrook doesn't ask what took so long. He just grunts and nods to the broom. You sweep, then supper. You sweep. Then you sit on the porch, eating your beans slowly, watching the last of the sunlight melt into the horizon. You made a delivery. You didn't get robbed. You mildly terrorized two drunks with a baked good. You're basically a legend now. Historians still argue about how many true heroes the Wild West produced. For every famed sheriff or gunslinger, there were hundreds of anonymous couriers, farmers, laundresses, and store hands who kept civilization wobbling forward. Quietly, without flair, just grit. You finish your beans. The harmonica starts again. The stars blink into view, bright and scattered like spilled sugar. You're not dead. You're not even broken. You're adapting. Awaiting continue. You're getting used to waking up with the sun now. Not because it's comfortable. Nothing about a straw-stuffed mattress and a blanket that smells faintly like goat is cozy, but because you have to. Sleeping in isn't an option when half the town is up before the roosters. This morning, the general store feels different, quieter. A nervous energy clings to the air like humidity before a storm. Mr. Holbrook tells you why. Town meeting today, noon. Big one. You blink. Town meeting about? He looks up from weighing coffee beans. Water rights. That doesn't sound exciting, but judging by the look on his face, it's more than just plumbing complaints. And sure enough, by midday, the whole town has gathered near the old saloon. People line the dusty street, ranchers, farmers, shopkeepers, a few who look like they wandered in from a whiskey dream. At the center, a makeshift stage built from crates and a few stubborn planks of wood. A tall man with a scar down one cheek steps up and clears his throat. Folks, he says, you all know the problem. Last month's snowmelt came late, rivers thinner than a gambler's luck, and someone's been diverting water upstream. A murmur rises. Someone yells, "We saw pipes on Dawson's land." Another voice, "That ain't proof." You stand near the back, trying to blend in. This is politics, frontier style. No microphones, no moderation, just sun, sweat, and simmering tempers. Mainstream historical fact. Water disputes were some of the most violent and enduring conflicts in the American West. With little centralized regulation, towns and individuals often built their own dams or ditches. The prior appropriation doctrine meant first users had rights, but proving who came first could lead to long, bloody feuds. A man in a wide-brimmed hat, Dawson, you assume, steps forward, defensive. I didn't touch that river. And if someone says otherwise, they better be ready to prove it. It's a threat disguised as a declaration. Everyone feels it. Suddenly, you understand why people carry guns to these things. A young woman speaks up. It's the same one from a few days ago, the green-skirted mystery with the knife vibes. I saw barrels being hauled at dawn, she says, arms crossed. East Ridge, Dawson's fence. The crowd hushes. Dawson glares. You calling me a thief, Miss Lark? She doesn't flinch. I'm calling Mom. You lucky no one's gone thirsty yet. You can practically taste the tension. That's when the sheriff appears, slow and steady like he's been summoned by narrative timing. He looks like a man who's made of leather, tobacco, and poor sleep. He taps the butt of his rifle gently against the wooden porch. This ain't gonna be solved today, he drawls. Not with shouting. We'll form a committee. 3 neutral folks. Take a look. Report back. A chorus of groans. Someone mutters, ain't no one neutral in this town. Fringe tidbit. Some Western communities had informal water courts, ad hoc systems where respected townsfolk reviewed disputes. These weren't legally binding, but often carried real weight. In some territories, judges were chosen by drawing names from a whiskey bottle. By sunset, things settle, but not really. Conversations still buzz. Accusations fly in whispers. People keep glancing at Dawson's barn like it might confess under pressure. Back at the store, you find yourself refilling sacks of flour while eavesdropping like a pro. One old-timer insists there's a secret well under the ridge. Another says Dawson's just the front. It's the railroad men what want that water. A third says it's a curse. You nod politely. You've learned not to argue with folks who believe in cursed aquifers. After supper, you take a walk. Part curiosity, part need to breathe. You wander out past the livestock pens in the edge of town, where the grass turns patchy and the ground cracks from thirst. The river really is thin. You crouch beside it and touch the water. Cold, clear, but barely flowing. Suddenly, you hear rustling behind you. You turn, and it's Miss Lark. She doesn't say hello, just nods toward the river. Pretty, ain't it? But it won't last. You straighten up. You think Dawson's lying? I know he is. She starts walking. And like an obedient storybook character, you follow. She leads you to a spot upstream. Hidden between trees, a series of crude wooden troughs, half covered in brush. Water diverts here, barely noticeable, unless you're looking. You whistle softly. Thought so, she mutters. Only question is, who helped him? You look around. Why show me? She shrugs. Maybe you're quiet. Maybe you don't belong enough to be dangerous. Or maybe you're just the least threatening person in town. You'll take it. Tomorrow, she says, we show the sheriff. Historians still argue whether frontier justice was effective or just performative. With little formal oversight, much of the West ran on reputation and retribution. While some sheriffs were fair and diligent, others were corrupt or outgunned. Often, it was civilians like Lark who gathered evidence, took risks, and exposed wrongdoing. That night, you lie awake thinking about water, about how survival here depends on things you used to take for granted: a faucet, a water bill, a sip from a bottle. Out here, every drop is fought for. And if you're not watching the river, someone else is. Awaiting continued. Dawn creeps over the plains like a hesitant cat, golden light stretching across rooftops and rickety fences. You're already awake, sitting on the general store's back stoop, nursing a cup of something that claims to be coffee, but tastes suspiciously like old leather and burned regret. You've got a date with truth, or at least with muddy evidence and a sheriff who may or may not care. Miss Lark shows up right on time. She's got a burlap satchel slung over one shoulder and a determined glint in her eye. No words, just a nod. You follow her out past the edge of town, retracing yesterday's steps to the hidden wooden troughs. The sheriff's already there. You freeze, unsure if this is good or bad. He squints at the contraption, scratches his chin, then glances at Miss Lark. "You bring me here to admire carpentry?" She doesn't even blink. You can follow it. Goes straight to Dawson's back paddock. He follows it. You follow him. The sheriff doesn't talk much, but you can see the tension in his jaw. He's not surprised, just tired. Tired in that this again kind of way that suggests this isn't Dawson's first plumbing-related crime. When the path ends at a freshly turned patch of dirt behind Dawson's barn, the sheriff sighs and kneels. He digs with his hands, uncovering the end of a pipe that disappears under the structure. "Well," he mutters, "ain't that just a pickle?" Mainstream historical fact. Water theft was a genuine issue in frontier towns. Ranchers and settlers sometimes diverted streams, built illegal dams, or midnight tapped wells from rival lands. There were even water wars, like the Owens Valley conflict in California, which lasted decades and inspired films like Chinatown. The sheriff doesn't arrest Dawson, not yet. Frontier justice needs witnesses, paper trails, dramatic courtroom scenes, or at least someone to throw a punch first. By noon, the whole town's buzzing. Some people defend Dawson. He's just trying to feed his cattle. Others call for his land to be seized, or worse. Miss Lark gets labeled everything from hero to troublemaker. She takes it all with a shrug. Meanwhile, you're back at the store, reorganizing tins of molasses and trying not to think about how fragile everything here feels. One secret pipe, and a whole town teeters toward chaos. And just when you think the day's excitement is over, the bell above the store door rings, and 3 strangers walk in. They don't look like Dawson's friends, or anyone's friends, really. They wear dusters that hang like drapes, wide-brimmed hats pulled low, and the kind of expressions usually reserved for wolves or unpaid bounty hunters. One steps forward. His boots make a crisp, deliberate thud. "Looking for Mr. Halbrook." You point to the back. He nods once and disappears through the curtain. The other 2 loiter, eyeing the shelves like they might challenge a can of beans to a duel. You try to stay invisible. Breathe shallow. Don't knock anything over. Voices rise in the back. Sharp, clipped. You can't make out the words, but you catch something about debt and shipment, and it wasn't part of the deal. Then silence. Mr. Halbrook returns alone. His face is pale under the beard. He says nothing, just starts stacking crates near the counter. You don't ask. You know better now. Fringe tidbit. Some general stores on the frontier were unofficial drop points for illicit trade. Whiskey, morphine, even weapons. Storekeepers often operated on thin profit margins and could be pressured by criminal groups. Rumors circulated of entire towns controlled by outlaws with polite smiles and loaded ledgers. That evening, you sit with Miss Lark on a bench outside the blacksmith's shop. The air smells like hot iron and river dust. "They weren't railroad men," she says. You glance over. "The ones in the store?" She nods. "They're hired guns. Seen one of them in Laredo. They don't ride unless there's money on the table." You shiver, despite the warmth. "What's Halbrook into?" She doesn't answer. But the question hangs there like a buzzard overhead. You walk home slowly. Every face you pass seems a little warier. Doors close a little faster. The town's rhythms feel off. That night, the wind howls. Literally. It rushes through gaps in the store walls, making the shutters rattle. You dream of rivers that run backwards, horses made of smoke, and eyes watching from under your bed. You wake up sweating, heart racing, and then you hear it. Outside. Footsteps. You creep to the window. Just shadows. But one of them turns, and the glint of moonlight catches metal. A gun. Then they vanish. Historians still argue how deeply organized crime penetrated frontier towns. Some claim most outlaws were small-time thieves. Others insist that powerful syndicates, especially those connected to railroads or land grabs, used intimidation and hired muscle to control entire regions under the guise of commerce. You lie back down, pulling the blanket tight around your shoulders. Out here, survival isn't just about grit or guns. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stay very, very quiet. Morning light hits your eyes like a sheriff's glare, sudden, unasked for, and impossible to ignore. You blink awake and remember, last night wasn't a dream. There were footsteps, there was a gun, and now there's a knot in your stomach the size of a buffalo. You half expect the general store to be burned down or riddled with bullets, but when you step outside, it's normal. Birds chirping, horses tied to posts, swirling like always. Too normal. Mister, Halbrook doesn't say anything about last night, just hands you a broom and points toward the porch. That's frontier language for business as usual. But you're not buying it, especially not when you spot the nail on the store's doorframe, brand new, hammered just last night. And dangling from it, a black feather. It's not decoration, it's a message. Mainstream historical fact. In the American West, feathers, especially black ones, were used by some outlaw groups as warnings. Inspired by native symbols or invented entirely by white desperados, they were tokens meant to intimidate, suggest curses, or signal impending violence. Kind of like the 1800s version of a horse's head in the bed, but with more rustic flair. Miss Lark shows up around noon. Her eyes immediately scan the feather. Thought they were bluffing, she murmurs. You stare. They? She looks at you for a long moment, then sighs. There's folks who want this town. Not for cattle, not for gold. Water. Control the creek. You control everything. Ranches, trade. Even the railroad needs it. You frown. So Dawson was a puppet? She nods. And now the strings are showing. She pulls the feather down and pockets it. They'll try something, soon. You're beginning to realize something unsettling. This isn't the Wild West of dime novels. This isn't duels at high noon or noble sheriffs and black-hatted villains. It's slower, smarter, dirtier. It's about leverage. And today, you feel very, very leverageable. That evening, the saloon fills early. People want distraction. You sit near the back, sipping sarsaparilla, which tastes like tree bark and Old Hope, and listening to the player piano rattle out a tune that was probably sad even before it went out of tune. The conversation at nearby tables turns to rumors. A land deed stolen from the courthouse vault, a mysterious buyer from Denver, a town east of here that dried up overnight, its wells poisoned. You don't know what's real anymore, but the danger? That feels real enough. Suddenly, the swinging saloon doors creak open. It's them again, the three strangers from the store. They move like smoke, silent, slow, practiced. Their eyes sweep the room, pausing, briefly, on you. One heads toward the bar. Another stays near the door. The third disappears into the back. The bartender doesn't flinch, just slides over a bottle, puff it, no words exchanged. You know you should leave. But curiosity is a stronger drug than fear. You follow, quietly. You find them behind the saloon, talking in hushed tones. Words drift in and out of earshot. Railroad charter. Lark knows too much. You step on a twig. Every head turns. You run. Your boots hit the dirt in panicked rhythm. You duck between buildings, through backyards, around a coop full of angry chickens that scatter like feathery grenades. You make it to the general store, heart punching your ribs like it wants out. Mr. Halbrook sees your face and doesn't ask, just locks the door behind you. That night, you and Miss Lark meet under the blacksmith's canopy. She's got a rifle. You've got a shovel. It's not exactly balanced, but hey, teamwork. She points to the ridgeline. We need proof. Land records. Maps. If they bought up the water, it'll be buried in deeds. You nod. And the courthouse? She grins. We're going to do a little light breaking and entering. Fringe tidbit. Many frontier courthouses were barely more than wooden shacks with a safe in the back and a nervous clerk up front. Some stored critical land documents in trunks, hat boxes, or under floorboards. Theft, or borrowing, was so common that some towns chained records to the sheriff's desk. You wait until 3 a.m., that sweet spot when everyone's either passed out or pretending to sleep with one eye open. The courthouse smells like mold and old paper. You tiptoe past a row of dusty benches toward a door marked Records. Locked. Lark pulls out a pin and works the lock like she's opening a birthday present. Click. Inside, you rifle through stacks of yellowed maps, deeds, and handwritten claims. One map shows the creek and a dozen small X's upstream. Mineral claims? You whisper. She shakes her head. Diversion points. One deed stands out. Dawson's Land. Sold last year, to a name neither of you recognize. T.H. Keller. But Lark freezes. Keller was part of the Harlow Company. She points to a half-burned flyer pinned behind the desk. Harlow and Keller Rail, expansion 1882. That's the connection, she breathes. They're buying Dawson's Land to reroute the water, not just for cattle, for the trains. Historians still argue about the scale of railroad corruption in the West. While some companies operated legitimately, others used shell buyers, intimidation, or forged documents to seize water, land, or mineral rights, often leaving settlers powerless. The legal system struggled to catch up with the sheer audacity of it all. You copy the deed, stuff it in your coat, and slip back into the night. Tomorrow, the town will have proof. Tonight, you just hope you make it that far. Word waiting, continue. You try. Crawl into your cot, wrap up in your thin blanket, listen to the fan creaking overhead. But your eyes just stare into the dark. Too much weight in your head. The proof is tucked under your mattress. A copy of the land deed, the map with the water diversions, the railroad flyer with the name Keller circled twice. You've got what the town needs. The question is, what will they do with it? At dawn, Miss Lark meets you behind the livery stable. She's already saddled a horse, and she hands you a rolled-up newspaper. Front page headline, Dawson's Deal, Water Rights Under the Table? You blink. How? I know the editor, she says, and he's mad Dawson once shot his cat. You can't tell if she's joking, but you kind of hope she's not. By 8 a.m., the whole town is buzzing louder than the saloon on payday. People cluster in knots, porch corners, hitching posts, general store steps, talking, arguing, pointing fingers. You hear the words fraud, railroad, and snake more times than you can count. Dawson's nowhere to be seen. But the sheriff is. He reads the paper, frowns, then folds it under one arm and starts walking, slowly toward Dawson's ranch. And just like that, a parade forms behind him. You're in the crowd, of course. Wouldn't miss this for the world. When you arrive, Dawson's already on his porch. Rifle across his lap. Hat low. He doesn't look surprised. Morning, he says like nothing's wrong. The sheriff steps forward. We got questions about land sales and water. Dawson shrugs. Ain't illegal to sell. Miss Lark steps out from the crowd holding up the deed. Not when it's forged. He narrows his eyes, and then you see it. A twitch in his jaw, a flicker of nerves. For the first time, Dawson doesn't look like the man with the upper hand. Mainstream historical fact. Land forgery was a genuine plague in the Wild West. With sparse record-keeping, illiteracy, and bribes, people could and did fake ownership of mines, farms, and whole valleys. Courts were months behind, and many victims never reclaimed their land. Then, the strangest thing happens. Dawson surrenders. Not with a dramatic speech or blazing guns. He just leans the rifle against the wall, raises both hands, and says, "Guess the game's up." You expect cheering. Instead, there's silence. Confusion. Even Miss Lark seems caught off guard. The sheriff cuffs him and leads him down the steps. And then you hear it. A slow clap from the back of the crowd. You turn. It's one of the hired men, the leader, the one with the boot-thud walk and the vulture eyes. Well done, he says. Town's got backbone. He tips his hat, smiles like a predator at a petting zoo, and walks off down the road. You shiver. Lark whispers beside you. He wanted Dawson gone. What? Dawson was reckless, too noisy. They needed him out of the way so they can take over cleanly, quietly. You look around. The townsfolk are shaking hands, slapping backs, thinking they've won something. But you feel it in your gut. This was just step one. A bigger game is in motion. That afternoon, the hired men vanish. Their room above the saloon is stripped clean, no trace left behind. That evening, the railroad rep arrives. Not in a cloud of dust, not with a trumpet, but in a tidy coach with polished brass trim. He steps out with a smile and an envelope, which he hands to the mayor. Proposal for water usage, legal, fair, profitable, he says smoothly. The mayor reads, blinks, hands it to you. You skim. It's airtight. And worse, it's technically generous. Landowners keep 30% of diverted water. Town gets a rail stop. Everyone gets paid. Everyone except the creek. Miss Lark's jaw tightens. They don't care about Dawson. They want the system. Fringe tidbit. Some railroad companies would create towns just to justify laying track. They'd build a post office, a saloon, a general store, and then file legal paperwork that essentially gave them control of local water and land policy. These were known as paper towns or railroad colonies. You and Lark meet in her tiny cabin that night. She's laying out maps, deeds, ledgers. What do we do, you ask? We fight back, she says, with something they don't expect. You expect her to say dynamite or horses or something dramatic, but she says truth. You blink. That's it? She smiles. You'd be surprised how dangerous truth is out here. You realize she's right, because now you've got eyes on you. People believe you helped take Dawson down. You're the outsider who did something, and that's dangerous. People love a hero until they need a scapegoat. Historians still argue whether local revolts against railroad corruption ever truly worked. Some towns succeeded, driving out corrupt buyers and preserving land rights. Others became ghost towns within a year, swallowed by broken deals and drained aquifers. You go to bed uneasy again. You're not sure if you saved the town or just cleared the table for the next round. But you do know this. The Wild West doesn't sleep. And tonight, neither do you. Word count, awaiting, continue. Sleep slips through your fingers like dust through a cracked floorboard. You lay awake, watching moonlight crawl across the ceiling, ears tuned to every creek groan and distant coyote wail. By now, you know the rhythm of this town. And tonight, something's offbeat. In the morning, it's not the sun that wakes you. It's the sound of hammers. You rush outside. Half the town's gathered near the creek. A crew is already there, driving stakes into the ground, laying boards, marking territory. The railroad's wasting no time. A tall man in a suit is shouting orders. He waves a folded map like it's scripture. You nudge Miss Lark. How did they move this fast? She grits her teeth. They didn't. They were ready before Dawson even fell. This was the plan all along. You spot the mayor nearby, holding a contract and trying his best to look confident. You want to be angry, but you get it. One bad winter, one failed harvest, and this whole place turns to dust. It's survival, and they're playing for keeps. But you're not ready to give up just yet. Isn't this illegal, you ask? Lark nods. If the water table is public, but if it's claimed through Dawson's old charter, she sighs. Then no, it's inconveniently legal. You hear the workers arguing in Spanish. You hear saws bite wood, and you hear the creak of inevitability. Mainstream historical fact. Many towns in the 19th century West were essentially steamrolled by the railroads. Despite local protest, the government often sided with companies, granting them massive land tracts and water access under the Pacific Railway Acts. Bureaucratic red tape and corporate loopholes made resistance difficult and often deadly. You and Lark need allies. You start with the newspaper editor. He's half drunk by noon, eating pickled eggs and muttering about journalistic ethics between sips. He listens to your theory that the railroad planned Dawson's downfall, set up a paper trail, and jumped on the land the moment he was out. Then he shrugs. Sounds like news. That afternoon, a second article hits the press. From ranch to rail, was Dawson just the first domino? It's speculative, loosely sourced, but it plants a seed. By sundown, 3 ranchers ride into town with questions. 2 shopkeepers lock their doors early. The preacher starts writing a sermon called Beware the Serpent with a Golden Spike. It's working, but barely, because the railroad's still building. And now the hired men are back, not sneaky this time, open, loud, armed. You count 5. One of them stares at you too long. Another wipes his boot deliberately on the general store's porch rail. Miss Lark steps out behind you, whispers, "They want us nervous. It's working." That night, you sit with Mr. Halbrook behind the store. He offers you whiskey. You sip. It burns like the truth. "I seen towns fight this before," he says. "They scream and stomp and curse the sky. Doesn't change much." "Then what does?" you ask. He taps his temple. "Knowing the one thing they don't want found." You lean forward. "Like what?" He smiles. "You tell me." He's right. There's something missing. The railroad moved too fast, too clean. You flip through the copy of Dawson's land deed again. And there it is. A signature. Keller's. But you remember the name from an earlier document. Not a buyer. A witness. Fringe tidbit. It wasn't uncommon for land sales in the Wild West to use the same few witnesses over and over, sometimes fictitious names, sometimes traveling notaries with no real authority. Fraudulent deals were often exposed by finding repeating names on unrelated documents. The paper trails always left crumbs. You and Lark dig deeper. At the courthouse, you bribe the night clerk with jerky and gossip. He lets you into the archives again. You stack deeds, ledgers, notarized letters, dozens of transactions, water rights, land parcels, easements. Every third document signed by T.H. Keller, even years before the railroad had a name in this town. He's been planting himself here for a decade, Lark whispers, buying land through fake fronts, building a case. And now, you add, they've wrapped the rope around our necks and handed us the contract as a souvenir. You gather the documents. Photocopies don't exist, so you carry the originals, 2 satchels full of legal dynamite. But when you return to town, something's wrong. Too quiet. The saloon's dark, doors shuttered, people hiding, and the general store's front window is smashed. You sprint inside. Mr. Halbrook is on the floor, blood on his forehead, but breathing. Barely. You kneel, shaking. What happened? He croaks. They took the papers. Lark's hand flies to her mouth. You check your satchels. Still full. But the courthouse files? The clerk? Gone. Burned. All of it. You feel your heart sink straight into your boots. Someone knew you were coming. Historians still argue whether the destruction of town records was strategic or incidental during railroad expansions. Fires were common in frontier settlements, but some believe sabotage played a larger role, erasing claims, ownership, and even entire family lines to make way for new industries. The truth is buried in ash. You sit in the dust, holding one satchel, while Lark tends to Halbrook. The railroad hasn't just taken your water. They've erased your proof. And now, you're not just fighting a corporation. You're fighting memory itself. The next day begins with the sting of loss, not the kind that cries out loud, but the dull, bitter ache that settles in your ribs and doesn't leave. They burned the records. The courthouse clerk? Gone. Disappeared in the night with a wad of money or the muzzle of a gun behind him. Either way, he won't be back. And now, the town is stunned silent. Folks still sweep their porches. Kids still chase sticks and dust. But the air feels thinner, the sky too wide, the silence too complete. The railroad didn't just move in. It proved it could erase you. You and Miss Lark walk up Main Street, your boots crunching on glass from the general store's broken window. Inside, Mr. Halbrook lies on a cot, a bandage over his brow, whispering curses in between spoonfuls of broth. He's mad at himself for not being quicker, tougher, smarter. But you're mad at something else, a system where power wears a smile and justice has to bribe the clerk. Still, you've got one edge, the papers in your satchel, copies of land deeds, water records, newspaper clippings, enough to raise eyebrows, if not convictions. Lark grabs your arm. We go big, or we vanish. You nod, and together you board a stagecoach. Destination, the nearest city with a federal land office and a regional newspaper. The ride takes hours. Dust stings your face. The horses wheeze. The road is rough enough to dislodge your spine, but adrenaline keeps you upright. The city feels alien, louder, faster, full of people who don't know or care about your quiet little war. You march to the federal building, documents in hand. Inside, a tired man with a mustache and a coffee stain on his shirt looks up. How can I help? You slam down the satchel. We need to file an injunction. He blinks. You a lawyer? No, he sighs. Then it's a long line. Mainstream historical fact. Injunctions, legal orders to temporarily halt construction or policy, were used even in the 1800s, especially when disputes over land ownership arose. However, without a legal representative and strong documentation, the process could take weeks or even months. And by then, the railroad was often already laid. You bristle. We have proof of fraud. He flips through a few pages. His eyebrows rise. Where did you get this? Your job, Lark says sweetly. He chuckles once, then sighs. Wait here. You wait, and wait. After an hour, a woman in a crisp blazer appears. She doesn't introduce herself. She just says, come with me. She brings you to a back office, offers water and a chair, then reads every page while you try not to bounce your leg clean off your knee. Finally, she says, we'll escalate it to the land commissioner, but it'll take time. You nod, then pause. How much time? More than you have. And just like that, the edge dulls. The next stop is the city newspaper. You meet with a young journalist named Byrne. He looks barely old enough to shave, but his notebook's already filled with shorthand. He listens, he asks sharp questions. Then he says, we'll run it. The next morning, the headline reads, Railroad Empire Accused of Frontier Fraud. Your name's in the article. So is Lark's. And just like that, the game's changed again. Because now, the railroad can't work in shadows. But that means you can't hide either. By the time you return to town, everyone's seen it. Some cheer, others glare, and some just nod as if to say, told you it'd get messy. And messy it gets. That night, someone tries to burn down Lark's cabin. The fire eats one wall before it's put out. Her horse breaks free. The chicken coop explodes for some reason. Maybe just bad luck. You spend the night with a bucket in each hand, coughing through smoke. Afterward, Lark leans against the singed fence and says, they're not subtle anymore. No, they're not. Fringe tidbit. In certain frontier towns, private security forces, often hired by railroads or mining companies, carried out what were essentially corporate terror campaigns. They'd break fences, intimidate families, torch buildings, and sometimes even stage shootouts to remove dissent. These groups were sometimes referred to as deputized men, though their badges were often self-issued. The next morning, you go to the sheriff. You expect him to say he's powerless. You don't expect him to quit. I ain't dying over water, he mutters, handing you his badge like it's dipped in acid. This town wants a war? It can find another fool. He rides off before you can answer. Lark holds the badge. You want it? You shake your head. I'd rather fight without a target on my chest. She pockets it. Good. Let's keep playing smart. Because now, the battle's no longer about truth. It's about endurance. You find new allies. The preacher opens his pulpit to speak about stewardship and justice. The school teacher organizes a petition with her students. Even the saloon posts a sign. No railroad talk here. We're tired. You laugh when you see it. A dry, weary laugh, but still. Historians still argue whether small towns ever successfully resisted large-scale railroad expansions. In some rare cases, through legal action, national media attention, or sheer stubbornness, they stalled or redirected routes. But in most cases, survival meant adaptation or relocation. You're not ready to relocate, and you're too tired to adapt. So you do the only thing left. You dig in. By sundown, you've drawn up makeshift defenses. You've nailed your documents to the church door, Martin Luther style. You've prepared letters for the city. You've wired telegrams to every office that might listen. The railroad wants silence, so you make noise. And as the desert wind howls through the night, your voice joins it. A whisper, maybe. But even a whisper can wear down stone, given time. Awaiting continue. You sleep in shifts now. Half the town does. There's no formal militia, just anxious shopkeepers with birdshot rifles and farmers with shovels. You post watches at the general store, the saloon, the church. Everyone's trying to act normal, but the town's heartbeat has quickened, loud in its own ears. Lark leaves her porch light on every night, just so you can tell she's still standing. At breakfast, you sip weak coffee and read the follow-up article from the city paper. It's longer, sharper, and includes a letter to the editor from someone claiming to be a former railroad engineer. It alleges similar land grabs in Arizona territory and near Cheyenne. Your hands shake slightly as you fold the paper. You're not alone. But neither is the railroad. By noon, 2 strangers arrive. Not thugs this time, men in dusty suits with polished boots and weathered eyes. They claim to represent the Central Resource Adjustment Bureau, which is the kind of name that sounds official until you realize it's stitched together from 5 vague words and a logo no one's ever seen. They walk into the mayor's office. When they leave, the mayor won't meet your eyes. You and Lark find him behind his desk, cradling a paperweight like it's a stress toy. They offered a buyout, he whispers, a full relocation package for everyone. You blink. The whole town? He nods. You lean in. Did you say yes? He swallows. I said I'd consider it. There it is, the beginning of the end. Because the only thing harder than standing up to power is convincing your neighbors to. Mainstream historical fact. Entire towns in the Old West were occasionally relocated or dissolved when railroads, mines, or oil companies made the land more valuable as industry than as community. In rare cases, towns were bought wholesale, schools, churches, and all, and their residents paid to move elsewhere. Some accepted, some didn't. You call a town meeting. It's held in the schoolhouse, which hasn't seen this many adults since the bake sale incident of '81, where Mrs. Rayburn tried to pass off Jell-O as historical pie. The room buzzes. Tension crackles. Lark lays out the situation. You explain what the papers say. What's already gone? What's still worth fighting for? People raise hands, shout. Some cry. One man mutters, "Let 'em buy it. We can't drink paperwork." Another spits, "My father bled for this land." You feel the room splintering, like a wagon wheel under too much strain. Then Mrs. Halbrook, who hasn't spoken in public in 10 years, stands up. "They want our silence. They want our surrender. They want our homes without having to look us in the eye while they take them. I say no." That turns the tide. The meeting ends with a vote. 32 want to stay. 12 want to leave. The rest abstain. You're staying, which means war. The next few days are a blur of planning, building, and praying. Lark sets up shifts at the town borders. You organize supplies, med kits, water barrels, extra blankets. The newspaper editor starts posting bulletins in every window. Stand firm, stay calm, stay loud. And then, just when you think things might stabilize, the well runs dry. Again, you rush out with Lark and 3 others. The pump sputters. The water table's been tampered with. The pipes are blocked. You dig for hours, cursing every inch of soil. Finally, under a tarp near the creek, you find them, sandbags and concrete shunts. Someone rerouted the stream, no doubt who did it. You send a telegram to the city. You call the land commissioner. You even try contacting that young journalist, Byrne, but replies are slow, and thirst moves faster. Fringe tidbit. In regions where water rights were everything, sabotage was common. Fences were cut, dams broken, and irrigation channels diverted, sometimes overnight. In one legendary case near New Mexico, a town fought for control of a single spring, and the dispute led to a 3-month standoff involving 6 counties and a total of 1 confirmed drink. People begin to pack, just a few, but it stings every time. You catch Lark one night in the church, staring at the walls like they might whisper back. She turns when you enter. "We're losing." You nod, but not gone. She half laughs, half sighs. "I thought if we just held out long enough." You touch her shoulder. "We still can." The next morning, you receive a letter. Not a court order, not a threat, but a petition from 3 other towns. They read about the article. They've seen the signs. They want to form an alliance, not just to stop the railroad, but to own it. They propose a joint settlement cooperative, shared water, shared rights, pooled legal resources. They've already pooled $200 in gold and one particularly aggressive mule. It's the lifeline you didn't see coming. You gather the town again. This time, the mood is different. Less panic, more resolve. The mayor signs the response himself, tears in his eyes. "I'm not a fighter," he says, "but I'm tired of running." You wire the alliance back. It's official. You're no longer just one dying town with dry wells and dusty windows. You're part of something bigger, a network, a resistance, and just in time. Historians still argue how much grassroots collaboration shaped the West's long-term development. While many small towns folded under corporate pressure, others found strength through cooperative lawmaking, early unions, and rural newspapers that exposed corruption. The myth of the lone cowboy is strong, but it often hid the truth of collective survival. That night, Lark joins you on the roof of the general store. You both stare at the stars, sipping warm cider. "Think we'll win?" she asks. You shrug. "Think we'll try?" She laughs. "That's good enough for now." Below, the town is quiet, not beaten, not victorious, just enduring. And sometimes that's the most heroic thing of all. Awaiting continue, morning breaks slow and soft, like the land is catching its breath. The air's crisp, cooler than usual. Somewhere a coyote calls, long and low, like it's mourning or maybe just remembering. You wake up in the general store's attic. Your bed is a pile of old grain sacks and a blanket that smells faintly of cinnamon and mothballs. You stretch, joints cracking, muscles sore from too many days of carrying too much weight. But outside, something feels different. The wind smells cleaner, the town quieter, but not in a fearful way. More like a held breath that hasn't turned into a scream. Lark bursts in halfway through your second biscuit. "They're here." You drop the biscuit and follow her. They turns out to be a group of riders, 10 in total. Dusty, sunburnt, and determined. One has a badge from another county. Another has a legal scroll so big it looks like it should come with a trumpet fanfare. One of the mules looks like it's been planning revenge since the day it was born. The alliance has arrived. They carry water, papers, testimonies, and more importantly, morale. The townsfolk gather to greet them. There's no cheering, just nods, eye contact, the subtle relief of knowing someone heard you. You sit with the group that afternoon, poring over paperwork. One of the visitors is a law student turned homesteader who explains things in plain terms. We filed joint ownership of the contested water lines, submit our grievance to the regional circuit judge, and send duplicates to the land office in 3 territories. This way they can't erase it all in one fire. Smart, Lark says. Paranoid, but smart. That's how we stay alive. By sundown, the plan is in motion. You send out messengers, make duplicate copies of everything. One goes to a lawyer in Santa Fe, another to a reporter in Kansas City. A third is hidden inside a hymn book in the church. No one's counting on mercy anymore. You're counting on paper trails. Mainstream historical fact. Legal resistance in the American West often hinged on one thing: paperwork. Deeds, claims, maps, and affidavits weren't just bureaucracy, they were weapons. And people who could navigate those documents often wielded more power than gunslingers or marshals. The next few weeks blur together. Meetings. Papers. Messages sent by riders who sleep in barns and eat cold beans from tins. Every day brings a new scrap of resistance, a name uncovered, a connection drawn, a letter returned with a stamp you've never seen before but now carry like a talisman. And then, a whistle. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The train is coming, not to destroy, to negotiate. You stand with the townsfolk as it pulls in, not a grand passenger train, just an engine and a few cars, enough to hold the suits. The men with smiles that don't touch their eyes, the women with folders clasped so tight they look like they're holding secrets. They step down, pause, look around, then approach. The negotiations are long. Days pass. Some of the railroad reps storm out. Others stay, slowly deflating under the sheer persistence of a community that won't vanish. And eventually, grudgingly, they offer terms. The railroad will reroute slightly. It won't touch the wells or the pasture. In exchange, it gets a plot east of town, enough for a small depot and a maintenance yard. No buyout, no relocation, just coexistence. You take it to the town, they vote. It passes by a single voice. Lark grins. Democracy tastes like sweat. You sign the papers under a cottonwood tree. The mayor hands you the pen. Thought you'd want to be the one. Your hand shakes as you scrawl your name, not out of fear, out of relief. Because somehow, against every odd, you're still here. Fringe tidbit. In at least 3 documented cases, railroads and small frontier towns reached compromise agreements after lengthy standoffs, often brokered by neutral lawyers, school teachers, or even ministers. These stories rarely made the history books, but their settlements formed the legal groundwork for future land dispute law. That night, there's a celebration. Not wild, not rowdy, just music, laughter, campfire stories, and pie. You and Lark sit on the edge of the square, plates balanced on your knees. So, she says, we survived a day in the Wild West. You grin. Barely. She nudges you. Bet we could survive too. You look out at the people, your people, dancing, arguing, living. Maybe. Maybe you could. Historians still argue whether small-town resilience in the Old West made a real dent in the march of empire. But as you sit there, boots dusty, stomach full, watching the depot rise on the horizon, not as a destroyer, but as a grudging neighbor, it's hard not to believe that every stand, every paper, every shovel of dirt mattered. Even if it only gave you one more day, one more night, one more story to whisper under the stars. Wind down. 300 words. And now, as the fire dies down and the music fades into memory, the town begins to settle once more. The embers crackle softly, casting little shadows that dance along the porch railings and the faces of those who stayed. You breathe in, slow and deep, letting the dry air fill your lungs, letting it go. The tension in your shoulders finally easing, the dust in your boots not such a bother anymore. For the first time in what feels like forever, you're not wondering where the next threat will come from. Just listening. To the soft wind in the grass. To the creak of a barn door swinging gently in the breeze. To the quiet hum of people sleeping with doors unlocked. Even out here, where survival feels like a coin flip, sometimes you win. You close your eyes. The ground beneath you is still warm from the day. The stars blink down slowly, like a sky full of patient eyes watching over a land that's seen more than its fair share of stories. You did it. You made it through. The Wild West didn't get you. Not this time. Sleep comes easier now with the knowledge that you didn't just survive, you endured. And in this land, that might be the greatest victory of all. So rest easy, traveler. Tomorrow can wait. End of script. Sweet dreams.